Hello and welcome to episode 4, Making That Kid Move. What you see in the last episode was me make a character and place him onto the level. What you also see is I was making it so that you could input the keys and you could move the character around. However, as you can see, the character was not actually moving. He was just a still image just being floating around the level. What you see in this episode is me actually making it so it looks like he walks as he goes around. And that's exactly what you see here at the moment, me just making an animated texture class. And this is just, as you can see, I've got somewhere called frames. And what I do with that is I'm going to use it exactly like the tile class. As you can see, I'm actually using tiles in frames. And all I do is I store a number of different tiles, and then I just tick the class every time. And it tells it that it has to update the frame that it's on, and it will update it accordingly. And you'll be able to see in a moment, this will make the character look like he's actually walking, because obviously this is how you make it look in the game. We don't want it to look like he's just floating along in the middle of nowhere at any point. Actually, I'll change back to an animated texture now. I'll tell it there's 2 frames, because that's how many I created off camera. And then I just make a get width and a get height in the animated texture because I forgot to. And here you can see me ticking the frame. What that does is that just makes it, as I said, so that I can increase the frame. And then current frame is the frame that it's currently on. This just makes it easier to render when it comes to that. As you can see, I'm rendering this now, and as you can see, you're just telling the frames. Frames dot get current frame. Current frame is actually a number as opposed to just holding the frame outside. This makes it easier, as this saves a little bit on memory, not a lot, but a little bit. As you can see, it was flashing. That's because I set the wrong grid coordinates. What I do here is I then save the image, and as you can see, it flashes. That's because I put the wrong coordinates in again. Now, as you can see, he was walking around only very quickly because I only needed to test it to make sure that he was walking. Okay, what I'm doing now is I'm making a tile called back still. The reason I do this is it's exactly what it says. This is just the still image for when he's walking backwards, for when he's actually not moving. So when you ain't inputting anything, that's what I want, is it to not move. Next thing I'm doing is I'm adding a tick counter. This will just make it so that it delays how quickly the frames all show. This is better, as you can see, he was walking really quickly before, whereas it's not obviously how someone walks. As you can see now, he's sort of walking at a good speed. I'll try and slow it down by half, and can't actually see what's going on. It's too small and a bit quick. What I'll do is I'll show you in the end what it looked like. As you can see there, the reason it weren't showing much as well is because it was only moving 1 pixel and a little bit of difference in colour. So what I do is I scale it up so that I can see closer. Next thing I do is I make characters. The reason I do this is this will make it so that further on in the game, when I want to make, for example, a bear, I can make a character of a bear and just keep making loads of different classes that work off of that same character. This will make it easier because obviously, as you see in a few games, when you've got loads of different monsters, you don't just have 3 monsters all different levels. You'll have, say, 12 monsters that use 3 different textures, and then you'll have loads of different levels of the 12 monsters. This will make it easy for me to do by using characters. And as you can see, I make a main player here, and that is exactly what it says it is. That is the main player's character. This will make it so if I ever want to put in an evil twin, I can do, and it won't involve a lot more coding. Although I'm not sure that if I'm going to put an evil twin in yet. That was just as an example. What I'm doing here is setting up a texture, and the reason I'm setting up a texture is just for the characters, as this way I can make animated texture extend texture, and in that way I won't have to constantly say, if it's an instance of animated texture, do this, if it's not, do something else. As you can see here, I'm making a character handler. This was my first idea for what I'm going to do. It was put a character handler in. And so basically what I do is I set all the characters up as a static. What this will mean is, by them being a static, this will mean that whenever I call character handler, the name of the class, I can instantly call main player. I don't have to create a character handler in order to be able to access the main player. And this is better as it means I don't have to hold a character handler anywhere in the game. I can just have it as a standalone class that just holds information. As you can see, I made it extend character. The reason for this was so that I could have all of them as characters and just in mob have it hold a character, or entity, sorry, have it hold a character, and I wouldn't have to change it so that it was a main player or whatever every time I created a new character. Next thing I do here is, it seems as though character is already a keyword in Java that I didn't know of, and therefore what you actually see me doing is changing character from saying character. Instead I change it to say person, and you'll see that shortly. As you can see, I have a little wait as I think about what I want to call it. Now I decide with person. Okay, so I just change everything so it says person, including the person handler as opposed to the character handler. And then I forgot to change it to say person, name of the variable. Next I have to set a get width and a get height for the person. Okay, and I then tell it to tick and render. What I've set up here is just if it's selected as you see before, and so I have to change it in both of them. And then for some reason I'm rendering at the bottom there. Okay, so what I set here is I set the person within the player's class, and this is just as I said before, so that it actually does have that certain person and textures used for it. Sorry about that was my battery going flat. What you now see is me setting a tick class in person. Now the reason for this is, as you can see, I set it X velo and Y velo. And the reason I do this is because this is where I hold the information of if the player is moving, or whatever it is that's controlling the person now. If it's moving, then it will call this to tick. And as you can see happening here, all I tell it to do is if the tick, which say equals 0 and the X velo equals 1, then set the current texture to forward walking. And the reason I do that is just as I say, if the Y velocity is 1, it means the player is walking from the top of the screen to the bottom of the screen. And therefore it should look like they're walking forwards or walking towards us. The next thing I do is tell the animated texture to tick and just set the current direction as forward. This will be used here where I start setting up if the Y velocity is 0. And the reason I do this is just so that if you're moving and then stop, you're facing the right direction. Otherwise I could have it that you'd say walk towards the screen and then turn around when you stop, and obviously that wouldn't look very realistic, and so that's why I've set that in there. Next thing I have to do is just make it so that animated texture does actually in fact extend texture, and then I remove a lot of stuff from it that obviously goes into the texture class. And then I forgot to tell the person to render, and as you can see it's setting the current texture to render, and it was equaling null. The reason it was equaling null is because I hadn't set it up originally. And so yeah, next thing I do is I tell it to render, and then when I run it again you'll see that it actually works. The other thing I forgot to do was just tell the main player that it had to call the super constructor. The reason the super constructor is just the constructor of the person class, and therefore this sets up all the original information that we set up in the person class. As you can see, when it's rendered you just see the map. That's because I'm not actually rendering the person at the moment as I've taken it out. Next thing you see is me trying to sort of mess around with it, because it was saying that the person the current texture, didn't hold any information, and then when trying to render it, obviously it was going wrong. Then for some reason, once I set it right, it goes fine, and I'm not quite sure why that went wrong, but it's one of them things that just happens. As you can see here, I'm just making sure that everything is okay, everything is doing what it's meant to be doing. However, it doesn't like it when I tell it to print out, and so I take current texture back out again, and you can see it's forward and the Y velocity is 0. What you'll see now is me messing around with it again, as I say. And what I do is I just put like a backup thing in it to just say make sure the current texture is not 0, and if it is 0, then it will adjust accordingly and not render, because that would mean there's a problem, and so therefore it wouldn't cause an actual problem in the program, it would just help it keep running until there was a texture. Next thing to do is, you can see, I tell it to tell me when it's selected, and the reason I'm doing this is I just want to make sure that the new texture looks fine and works with the selected ability. As you can see, it's never printing selected, so I just take them out of it so I want to see what it is actually printing. As you can see, it's only printing selected when it is actually clicked, and that isn't, according to this, it isn't being clicked, and therefore what I do here is just make sure that it's all set up correctly. And so I put the X0 and the X1 in, and then the MX, and what that will do is just tell me where the mouse is, where the X1 and the X0 is. Then I realised I didn't set the width and the height for the character, and then as you can see it works fine after I set that. The next thing you'll see me doing is once again moving over to the main player class, and I'll be adding more textures to it, and these will be for walking back, left and right. And obviously don't have to implement them that hard, I just have to make sure that they're in the thing, in the class, and then I'll just implement them down here to tell it that when the velocity is -1, I want it to be walking backwards instead, and to set the current texture as backward. And then obviously I have to say that when the velocity is 0 and it's backwards, just to tell it to stand still backwards. And as you can see, he walks fine. Next thing you see me doing here is just editing the images a little bit, so that his hands are a little further away, so it looks a bit better when he's walking away, as opposed to just looking like his hands are swapping places. I was trying to make it look like he was actually walking. You see it's a lot better on the right walking texture. As you can see here, I'm just implementing it still. But as I was saying, it works a lot better on the left and right, as I was able to show his arms, actually show his arms swinging, whereas opposed to the back and forward, I wasn't able to do this, as you don't get to see that on the screen. As you see here, he's still got a black border around him. That's just because I forgot to take it off the image, and I don't do that at the moment. And as you can see here, that was just a little bit of organising. I was making it so the right still was with all the rest of the still images, and the walking was down with where the walking should be. Next thing I do is just set it to the right walking, so that it actually walks when he goes right, as opposed to just sort of sliding along, as this is what the whole program's been about, stopping him just sliding. Next thing I do is I scale it up just so I can keep an eye on him, make sure he's doing what I want him to do. As you can see, he's doing it fine. And then what I do is make a left walking and a left still, as this will be just walking in the other direction. And you'll be able to see that in a short moment. Okay, that's been episode 4, making that kid move, new Motion programming with Matt, and please check back next week.